airplane mode so they don't interrupt us. The meeting is recorded. It's filmed for live broadcast and subsequent broadcast, unless there are any confidential items we go, but there aren't any tonight. So by entering the council chamber, you are de facto accepting that you will be potentially on camera and are consenting to that. I don't think members need to be reminded, speak as close to the microphone and as clearly as possible, apart from anything else, to make sure that the public can hear clearly. Obviously raise your hands if you want to speak, and all debate and discussion through the chair. It says here we won't be using delegate cards, but we are, aren't we? So, okay, fine. And if you're referring to a specific report page or slide, mention the report page or slides so that we all know what we're talking about. And if possible, collect your post from the members' lounge afterwards. Okay, apologies. We've got various apologies. Hayden Jones, Lorraine Patrick, Martin Piercy and Mark Ryder. Any other further apologies that need to be noted? No. In which case, I don't think there are any declarations of interest. If anybody has a no, fine. Minutes of the 12th of September meeting. There was an error highlighted in the previous, where is it? Yes, there was an error that was supposed to be corrected, where the ward councillors were put into the membership of the committee on the minutes. That's been corrected on the minutes that I've got. I'm quite wondering what because we're now October, that was September. I'm not quite sure. Anyway, the only thing was that there was supposed to be a set of minutes that was altered. The minutes went out with your papers, repeated the mistake, but I've actually got a correct set of minutes which have corrected that. I'd actually completely forgotten about that. So are you okay with me signing the minutes that need to be signed, or does anybody for the 12th of September, or has anybody noticed any other problems with them? In which case, can I have a show of hands that it's okay for me to sign minutes? Thanks. Okay, planning schedule 4.1. We've got basically 3 TPOs tonight. So the first one is land adjacent to 162 Arrowsmith Drive, Stonehouse. It's a new tree protection order. Case officer is Francesca. John, are you going to actually be introducing the... Yeah, John's, I think, going to be introducing the reports on all of these. Francesca, just to introduce her to the committee, is our new trainee tree officer. And she's sitting on the right of John. Francesca's done the reports on these TPOs. So, John, you want to take it away?
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so the first one we've got it's a new TPO at Arrowsmith Drive. As you can see here, the tree is circled at the top right, at the top here. The tree is located to the rear of 162. It's an oak tree. It's located adjacent to the footpath, which is the dotted green line. You can see that goes along the back of the houses, across, and then it carries on across towards Standish. And then this area here is the school playing fields for Maidenhill School, which the school building's at the bottom here. So this is the tree there. So it's a large oak tree. Whilst there's some minor deadwood, it appears to be in a normal condition for a tree of this size and age. We consider the tree is worthy of a TPO. It's in a prominent position, provides amenity value to the surrounding area. You can see the footpath on the photo to the left. You can see that it's not overgrown and appears to be well used. The tree was under threat because the occupier of the neighbouring house was asking about felling it, so that's why we thought it was expedient to protect it. We have received objections to the TPO. The neighbours raised concerns about branches and leaves falling off, and whilst we appreciate it is located near to the neighbouring houses, we don't consider that's a warrant for removal of the tree. We also don't have any evidence to show that the tree is dangerous or unsafe. Here's some photos that the neighbours provided us. You can see there's the issue of the leaves and the branches that they're showing us. So you can see their garden and the oak trees there on the left. And yeah, they've provided some further photos as well since the report was written. So you can see that's from the front of the house with a tree behind to give you an idea of the scale. And then obviously more leaf debris from the tree. So just to confirm that what officer recommendation is to confirm the tree preservation order as recommended without modification.
Thanks, John. Next we have public speaking. I think we have Matty Ross, Councillor Matty Ross from Stonehouse, as a ward member, is going to speak. You don't have a time limit, Matty, but we do appreciate brevity.
I'll try and be brief, Chair. Thank you for coming to Stonehouse, first of all, for a site visit. I was glad I was able to accompany you. I don't normally come to DCC. I don't usually feel that strongly about things, but after the last DCC, when I attended a site visit, when I felt I was misrepresented by another ward councillor who gave opposing views to the ones I felt I had to come tonight. So please bear in mind that I don't feel particularly strongly about this, but I do in a way because it's a magnificent oak, and I would very much support the tree preservation order going on. I think having seen it for myself, it is on in a sort of an awkward place in who has ownership of the tree. I couldn't ascertain that. It's on a very well used footpath from Stonehouse to Standish, and while I understand there is some of the residents' concerns, I do not feel that is concern enough, because leaves falling into a garden is a perceived inconvenience, and I do not think it's an actionable nuisance in my view. And I do assume the tree, having been there for several hundred years, would have been there when they bought their home. I have spoken to somebody, our tree man in Stonehouse, and he feels that branches falling off is not something that would happen spontaneously. He feels that they would not do that without warning. And I do not feel that claiming a tree might be dangerous is not sufficient to undertake work on this protected tree if it is protected. Of course, it should be established about professional inspection if the residents feel that way. But I would very much agree with the TPO being put on this tree, and this magnificent oak. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Matty. And Stonehouse Town Council have sent Councillor Teresa Watt. You have 4 minutes. I'll give you a warning if you're going over.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you for inviting us along to speak. Like our ward councillor, Matty Ross, we in Stonehouse Town Council are very keen on putting a tree preservation order on this tree. It is magnificent. It's bringing the rural historic landscape into the edge of our town. It is obviously urban fringe there, with the estate butting up to a rural footpath and the edge of the school. But it is a magnificent tree, and as you walk down the footpaths from Standish, you see it visible from quite a distance. So we do understand the residents' views, and obviously if there is any safety issues, as the tree officer, as the planning department have said, actually providing evidence and coming up with a tree officers and inspection report could change that. But in the meantime, we think it is a very significant tree locally. It is visible from quite a distance. It is along a footpath that, as Councillor Ross says, is very well used. It would be such a shame to fell that tree when there is no danger or no risk currently. That might change, but yes, we would like to see the tree preservation order installed and put on this tree. Thank you.
Thank you. And now, speaking in opposition to the application of the tree preservation order, got the two residents who neighbour the tree, Asif Hussain and Sajida Hussain. You'll have 4 minutes as well, and I will have to warn you if you look like you're going over, okay?
Thank you very much.
The time will be up on the screen.
Okay, thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to come in today. I appreciate it is a fantastic tree and it does look amazing, but to say it's not dangerous, you'd have to live in the adjacent house, which is what we're living in. We cannot use that section of the garden. We haven't used it for the whole summer. We only moved in Christmas last year, and throughout the whole summer, we haven't had a chance to even use it because the branches are constantly falling, the acorns are constantly falling. The drains are all blocked. We've just recently had them cleaned out. The leaves, when we moved in the December, were literally knee high. It took us almost 2 weeks to take all those leaves up. We have young children that are unable to use that side of the garden because of the falling branches. The photos that we sent in, obviously we weren't able to add more photos to that because we weren't allowed to, but if you went to see it now, it's that side of the garden is now full of leaves and full of branches and full of acorns. We have a dip to the garden as well, where we would like to put garden furniture, but we cannot put garden furniture there because the acorns are constantly falling. It's far too high. I don't think it's ever been maintained, the tree. So you can't, even though it's huge and yes, it looks great from a distance, when you're sitting in your garden, it doesn't look that great because it's towering over the house. When we had those recent quite bad winds, if any of the branches did loosen and fall, they would fall on the house. So we do object against the TPO, and we would like the tree to be felled down to a more safer level so that people around can enjoy it. I appreciate that, but we also, living there with young children, can enjoy our garden as well. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, and we're talking about the path behind. The path was never maintained either. That lawn was mowed by myself to clear that path. The whole of summer, those nettles were not cleared. When the photo was taken, that was just before I had mowed the behind of that area just to clear the path for the dog walkers, but very rarely that's been cleared, and nobody owns that land or has ever said anything about it, because we looked at that TPO, or we looked at the tree before and asked a lot of questions. Who owns the tree? So we can go and speak to them and see who can maintain it or bring it down a little bit so that it's not overpowering. The other issue is when the leaves fall and it rains after, they become very, very slippery, and when the children are running on, they've kind of had almost near misses. So it's always, the hazard is quite high for something bad to happen. We've just had some high winds and we had sort of 2-inch thick branches fall. I was going to bring one in, but I didn't think it was appropriate to bring it in here, but I could send another photo, or the photo I sent to Francesca were just a couple of days ago, and if you go and have a look now, it's worse than what those clearing I did. So whenever there's a sunny day, I clear it up, and then the next rain comes along or a little bit of wind, and it's the same again on the amount of stuff that we cleared up. There's branches hanging over the neighbours as well, and they're sort of not happy as well. So we collected a petition for the people that it affects the most, hence why we sort of wanted it either maintained. I mean, the best case would be to have it felled, of course. It's not great, but it's in so much proximity to the house that if lightning strikes it, it's going to fall onto our property, which is a bit of a hazard. And then the worst case scenario is to just get it brought down a little bit and have it maintained on a regular basis.
Okay, sorry, you've just gone over the 4 minutes, so I'll have to stop you there. Thanks for that. Okay, any questions for officers, either John or Francesca? Yep, Lucas.
Can I just be clear in my mind that if there's a TPO on a tree, that doesn't preclude a tree surgeon doing an inspection and possibly saying that it might need some attention? That's correct, isn't it?
Yes, what it does is protects the tree, so it doesn't stop people doing work to it, they just have to come and ask us first. So it doesn't stop appropriate work. If you came with a tree survey and provided the evidence that work is needed, you're likely to get consent. We just have to check it first. So it does allow you to do work, we've just got to check it.
Thank you, John.
Yes, Gary, and then John.
We've got 3 TPOs, so I'll ask this question now, but it does apply to all 3. It's about whether the existence of a TPO that we place, does that impose any duties on Stroud, and could any of those duties sound in damages? Sorry, that's a bit of a technical question, but...
It doesn't place any duties on us as an authority to maintain the tree. The responsibility remains with the landowner and the owner of the tree. So it's still for the owner to do any works or make sure it's safe. The responsibility is on them. What it does is it protects the tree and gives us that check that we were just talking about whether it should be removed or is the work appropriate. We get to have that oversight before work can be done.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not sure if I detected was there a question in there? You were talking about, do we have liability if we put a TPO on and then something happens?
I'm working on the basis that because we have no duty, we'll have no liability.
Yep. Okay, John, and then Helen.
Thank you. Couple of questions. Have we established who actually owns the tree?
No, I don't think we have. It is in question between where the boundary lies, but what we've done to address that is we've served notice on both sides so that we know we've served notice on the owner. We just don't know for definite exactly who owns it, if that makes sense. So we've served it on everyone so that we've definitely served it on the owner. We just, I couldn't say that it's the neighbour that is the owner.
That leads to another one then. Can we put a TPO on a tree that doesn't have an owner, sorry?
Well, it does have an owner. It would be a matter for the interested parties between them to work out who is actually responsible. So what we've done is we've served it on all the interested parties. So we know we've served it on the right people. It's just we've gone over and above by serving it on the neighbour as well, depending on who is the actual owner. Yeah, so we've done it on both.
And one more, if I may, Chair. We all know that the roots of the tree spread further than the canopy. So is there any likelihoods of the roots interfering with the foundations of the neighbouring house?
Well, I don't have any details on that, so I'd need a technical report to tell us if that was happening. But that wouldn't... What we're saying is the trees of merit to be protected, but if... And we can put the TPO on, but if in the future that someone suggests that work needs to be done, they'd provide a technical report which could address issues like that, and then we'd have to consider the merits of that at the time. So that doesn't stop us protecting it now, because we don't know that it doesn't.
Okay, and on a technical point, even if we, I'm assuming, even if we couldn't establish who the owner of a tree was, we could still put a TPO on the tree if it became impossible to establish the ownership because, you know, the tree's the tree and it needs protecting. So, right, I had Helen and then Jenny. Yeah.
So I'm just concerned that given what we haven't identified the owner of the land that the tree's on and the owner of the tree, that's also the issue that the neighbours at 162 mentioned, that they've looked into this and they're unable to identify the owner of a tree to talk to them about doing maintenance work. So I wondered if we could, if there's any way forward for us to point them in the right direction to how they might take that issue forward, because clearly there's an issue for them and some difficulties there, whether there's a TPO or not.
Yeah, no, we totally understand and appreciate the difficulty. Likewise, if they don't necessarily own it themselves, would they have the right to fell it and carry on and do work to the tree themselves? But it's not for us to establish the ownership. That would be a civil matter for them and the other interested parties. And it's not our responsibility to maintain it. So whilst we can offer advice and guide them, they would probably need to take their own legal advice and investigate it further. But what we're satisfied is that we've met the regulations for making a TPO to protect it. We've served notice on the interested parties, carried out the necessary publications so that the tree preservation order can be placed, but it doesn't necessarily identify who is the responsible party to do the works, but we've definitely served it on everyone.
Yes, I feel comfortable that as a planning department, we've covered ourselves and we've done all the right things. And I appreciate it's slightly beyond our remit to say how to go forward, but you said it's a civil matter and the residents would need legal advice as to how to proceed. But there is a way forward in terms of, even if there is a TPO, going down that route and getting advice and applying to do maintenance work on the tree. There is a way forward for them, whether there's
Yes.
a TPO or not. Yeah.
Yeah, they would need to take advice on the boundary, and it could be the discussion about the thickness of a line on a deed and where when they bought it, who had control of this land, or if it's with the developer or the adjacent land. So yeah, there's a question mark, but it's more of a legal question rather than a sort of.
So it could even be the
merit
solicitors
planning
that advised them when they were purchasing the property.
Yeah, they'd need legal advice.
Yeah, so basically a TPO doesn't stop maintenance work. It doesn't interfere with a civil disagreement or trying to find a civil answer to the ownership of a tree. But it's always worth bearing in mind that damaging a tree that doesn't belong to you can incur some serious damages. I mean, a big mature tree like that, you could be talking tens or hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of compensation for it. There are ways of calculating that, and it can be people who have come a cropper over that, cutting down a tree and then suddenly finding they've got a bill from somebody for £100,000. Always worth making sure you're legally on sound ground. Jenny, diving next.
I think my question might have been answered because I walked the footpath at the back and I did notice that limbs have been missing and it looks as if it could do with some expert maintenance, but I'm not sure if we don't know who owns it. It could just mean that the people who live there are left in limbo, and it sounds as if there's nothing that we can do to make sure that this tree is looked after, because if it's not properly looked after, it could become unhealthy, couldn't it?
Yeah, we're not saying that the tree doesn't need work. It might need some TLC, and that there is appropriate maintenance that probably is needed. What we're saying is that doesn't stop us putting a TPO on now, and then we can, we can help facilitate discussions, but the neighbour would need to seek that independent advice from either a solicitor or a surveyor to be able to tell them where the boundary line is and if that tree is in their ownership, their control. We can help, but it's not our responsibility to actually find the answer. If that, we can help, but we can't necessarily provide the answer.
Okay. Any other questions? In which case, anybody wish to propose the officer advice so we can go into debate? Or other than the officer advice? Okay, Martin Brown proposed. Lucas, are you seconding?
Yes.
Okay. Technically, I have to ask you, Lucas, do you want to speak now?
No, I don't need to speak now.
Okay. All right. We go into debate. Did you want to kick off, Martin, since you...
Yeah, just to say, the amenity value of the tree seems clear to me. It's a feature. It's the only tree along that section of the footpath, and it's a fine-looking tree. The nuisance of leaves and acorns falling into the garden, I understand, and all of us who have trees either in our own gardens or leaning over them have to deal with that. That's sort of normal if there's a tree. As to real danger from the limbs, as has been said, they could get a tree survey, get expert advice, and if there is a real danger, then that could be dealt with appropriately. So I support putting the TPO on. Thank you.
Okay, I haven't seen any other hands. Is that... yes, Victoria?
Thank you, Chair. Just to agree, I think it's an absolutely beautiful tree. The TPO doesn't stop any felling or maintenance work to be done. I appreciate the leaves falling is a nuisance, as Martin's just implied, but I think actually that's quite a nice problem to have. Instead of concrete building cities, we live in a certain area, we should be able to protect those things that make us more urban and rural as a combination as we are in the Stroud Valley. So I will be supporting as well.
Okay. Lucas, you didn't want to?
Yeah, I mean, just to sum up, I think, we're all aware that trees need to be maintained. We're all aware that the value they are, and I think certainly in these times of climate change, it's even become more important. And in fact, the tree might provide some welcome shade in very hot days. And it's already been said, if the tree is a danger and that gets backed up by a report, I think as a council we're duty bound to take that in consideration and allow for necessary work to be undertaken. So I'm fully for putting the TPO on in the awareness that that doesn't preclude any work being taken on if necessary.
Okay, if we're done with debate, I think we can probably go straight to a vote. Okay. So when the lights come up, it's 1 for yes, which is to approve the TPO as per officer advice, 2 if you disagree, and 3 to abstain. I haven't got any lights up. Okay, so 1 to approve the TPO, 2 if you disagree. Okay, and that's unanimous. Okay, right. Item 2 is land at Gunhouse Lane, Bowbridge, Stroud. Again, John's going to introduce the report on this one. And again, the officer advice is to confirm the tree preservation order, which it is on all of these. Okay, John.
Thank you, Chair. Yep, second item. This is a tree preservation order. This one has various elements to it. We've got a single tree, a Lawson cypress at the top, you can see on the location plan. We've then got a group of yew trees in the middle. There's 15 in total, and then we've got 2 groups of lime trees at the bottom there. There's 3 in each group. So these are a group of mature trees. They're located on land between Gunhouse Lane, which is at the top of the plan there, and Thrupp Lane at the bottom. This is in Thrupp. There's a path, a restricted byway that joins Gunhouse Lane to Thrupp Lane, so it goes through from the top to the bottom there, through underneath the trees. If I've got a photo. Okay, yeah, so that's a photo of the trees. We've got the lime trees on the left here, the yew tree group in the middle, and then the Lawson cypress at the back there. Yeah, on the middle one you can see the footpath or the byway going through the middle there, so it appears to be well used and connects through the schools nearby, and apparently it's well used by residents as well, going on the school run through and down and along Thrupp Lane. We consider the trees make a positive contribution to the character of the area. You can see them as you go, obviously along the path that goes through underneath, but also from the wider area. And as you see on the left there, the lime trees are quite prominent in the road when you go up the lane as well. So we think there's clear amenity value. Yeah, these shots show that's within the site. So these are the yew trees. So you can see that the path goes right underneath all of them. So there's the added. They've got the prominence in the wider area, but also that close view and prominence from actually the path, and the benefit you get and enjoyment from actually going underneath in close proximity to the trees. The TPO was requested by a local resident, and it appears to be a well-used and valued route. The owner of the tree passed away recently, so that's where the concern is raised about the future use of the sites, which is why we think there's an expediency to protect the trees. Concerns have been raised about the level of maintenance work that has carried or hasn't been carried out on the trees. Similar to before, we can appreciate that work does need to be done, and it's probably more obvious on some of these trees, but the benefit of them, we feel there's still that clear public amenity, and as we said before, the TPO doesn't stop appropriate work being carried out, and it still remains the owner's responsibility to do that work to make sure the trees are safe and to maintain them in an appropriate fashion. So with this one, we're also recommending that the TPO is confirmed without modification. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, John. Okay, public speaking, ward member, we have Councillor Becky Oldham. You don't have a time limit, but as I mentioned to Matty, we appreciate brevity.
Sorry, that didn't help the brevity, did it? Hello everyone, good evening. I'd like to talk to you about the TPO on these trees between Gunhouse Lane and Thrupp Lane. So the Woodland Trust says that TPOs are most commonly used for trees with high amenity or nature conservation value. And since 1947, this protection has been afforded to trees around the UK as a means to offer practical protection to trees under pressure from new housing, roads and industrial development. This is a very real concern. As was just mentioned, the land has been newly inherited and the new owners may wish to do any number of things with that land. Although it is on private land, it is now, thanks to the heroic efforts of a local resident, a recognised byway, so the public have a right to pass through it. It's therefore even more important that the trees along that byway are protected too. The trees, as you can see, are mature, large, and therefore likely to contain much wildlife and support many ancillary species. The Lawson cypress, for example, the dense foliage provides shelter for nesting birds, including various finches, where many broadleaf trees are still in bud. The lime flowers are very important for producing a richly flavoured honey in beekeeping. The Tilia species themselves are used as a food plant, particularly by butterflies and moths. Lime leaves are eaten by caterpillars of many moth species, including the lime hawk, peppered vaporer, triangle, and scare hook-tip moths. They're very attracted to aphids, providing a source of food for their predators, including hoverflies, ladybirds, and many species of bird. The flowers provide nectar and pollen for insects, particularly bees, who also drink aphid honeydew from lime leaves. Long-lived trees provide dead wood for wood-boring beetles and nesting holes for birds. The yew is one of the longest-lived native species in Europe. Their fruit is eaten by birds, such as blackbirds, mistle thrush, song thrush, and fieldfare, and small mammals, including squirrels and dormice. The leaves are eaten by caterpillars of the satin beauty moth. Anti-cancer compounds are harvested from the foliage of the yew and used in modern medicine. And anyone who's read the incredibly moving A Monster Calls, a novel by Patrick Ness, can appreciate the significance and importance of these beautiful trees. I've asked the community around us what they think of these trees. Most of the answers usually come back, I love those trees. It's been dubbed by the fairy place by some of the local children, and the cut-through is a welcome break from the traffic along the lane upon which there are no pavements. The trees provide shelter and coolness. One mum on the school run said, I'm looking at a laptop all day, so I look forward to this part of the school journey. I definitely feel it, being a part of nature, and the children benefit from it as well. I love these trees. But we Throppers and Gunhouse Laners aren't selfish. This amenity is felt by all for many miles around. You can actually see them from the common. They're a really beautiful part of the vista from all around. Another parent said they're surprisingly full of wildlife. We've seen lots of birds there. They're also brilliant shade for walkers and cyclists using it as a route to school. And we often stopped and cooled down in the shade on the way home from nursery on hot days. I also consulted my mini advisors on this. One of them said, I like the sun umbrella on a hot day, and I like to think that fairies live there. And the other one told me, in no uncertain terms, make sure you tell them not to cut down where the elves and the squirrels live. But it's not just the shade or the elves. Research has shown that spending just 30 minutes in the company of trees can show significant reductions in cortisol levels, the stress hormone, pulse rates and blood pressure. It can even improve the ability of the immune system to function. As part of the National Health Programme, the Japanese have long adopted forest bathing, and although we can't get lost among these few trees up here, the benefits to our communities at having these trees so nearby is substantial. They provide benefits to people both on Thrupp Lane and Gunhouse Lane who maybe can't get down and up the really steep hills around us, which are between us and most of the other trees in this area. I'd like to make the point that of the maintenance objections, the ones from the local neighbourhood are not actually objecting to the TPO. Their maintenance concerns are valid and they're serious, and I'm taking them up outside this meeting. They're objecting, quite rightly, to the lack of care and maintenance that the trees have received over the years. These concerns are being addressed separately. I've communicated both with the Head of Development Control and with the tree officer, with John, on what can be done. And if it's deemed those trees are a danger and the owners continue to ignore requests to maintain them, there can be action taken. It's also relevant to note that the owners have declined to do any maintenance work requested by residents living all along the lane. One resident said to me they've paid for trees outside their property to be cut back to ensure it's clearer and safer to leave and enter their property. And calls have also gone unheeded to maintain that road service and many other maintenance issues. Is it not more pressing, therefore, that the trees are protected from owners who seem to care little for the welfare of their land and the people and the trees and nature upon it? I've spoken to Martin as well, and as he stated before, the TPO requires the owners to apply for maintenance, but reasonable requests for maintenance aren't really refused, and the TPO is no obstacle to a thoughtful owner who wishes to maintain a tree on the advice and using the services of a trained arboriculturalist. So I've shown that these trees more than amply qualify for a TPO under the criteria of size and form, future potential as an amenity, rarity, cultural, historical value, contribution to in relationship with the landscape, and contribution to the character or appearance of a conservation area. I see it as our duty, therefore, to protect these trees, who, whilst having no voice of their own, protect so many other species and the well-being of the people who pass beneath them daily. I'd like to end by quoting from the first ever tree preservation order discovered in ancient Greece. It's 2,000 years old. The stone tablet says, "No one shall cut wood from the sacred place." Please vote this evening to confirm the TPO on the trees in our fairy place. For the children, for the local elders, for families, for insects, for mammals, for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Becky. Brimscombe and Thrupp Parish Council, Councillor Tim Harris. You'll have 4 minutes and the clock will be up on the screen and I'll let you know if you're starting to go over.
Thank you, Chair. I shan't need 4 minutes. Thank you all for the opportunity to talk to you. I can only, on behalf of the Parish Council, echo what Becky has just said. This particular area is quite small, but it's a locally recognised green space. It forms one of the green spaces in our draft neighbourhood plan, which is currently going forward. It has got the byway through it, and it is frequently used, mainly by walkers. I've not actually personally seen any horses being ridden through it. I went through on my bike the other day, but it's really important that we kind of like just keep an eye and protect all these little small green areas, because it's not so much their individual value, it's the contribution they make to the overall value of our environment. And while one Lawson cypress and a few yew trees might not seem a big deal, actually, when you look at it, especially as Councillor Oldham said, from the other side of the valley, you know, this is all part of a really valuable natural environment. The other reason we're concerned that the TPO should be granted is that when land changes hands, the new owners have ideas about what that land might be used for. If a TPO is not in place, then we could find these trees felled, and then you get all sorts of, you know, issues arising around development being requested and all this kind of thing. And we've seen it. We've seen it before in the parish, and in fact I spoke about a related issue a year or so back. So yes, it's important that we keep these orders in place, not only to protect the current environment, but also to protect the future environment. Lastly, I would say, I'm just reiterating the point about maintenance. You know, I've spoken to the local residents. They are entirely legitimately concerned about the fact that these trees have had no sensible maintenance done on them for donkey's years. And that is a concern. It's definitely a concern. But not having the TPO in place would make those, wouldn't ameliorate those concerns at all. And it might, you know, the implications of going forward might be worse, really, if the owner was to just say, oh, they're too far gone now, we're going to have to cut them all down. So, although the concerns are legitimate, the route out of this is to, you know, make sure that the correct maintenance is done. And a TPO actually, I believe, would help us do this, because it would bring, you know, the matters of maintenance to the attention of council. So, Brimscombe and Thrupp Parish Council support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. And now I've got Cherry and Michelle Norman who are speaking in opposition to the TPO. And again, you'll have 4 minutes and I'll have to tell you if you're going over.
Good evening. Firstly, I'm not opposed to the TPO order on the trees because our garden backs onto these trees. Ours is basically lack of maintenance, and as discussed, I've heard you say it's down to the landowner to maintain the trees. Now, we have approached the landowner on several occasions for the last 15 years or more to try and cut the trees down. Not cut them down, but to maintain them. But no tree surgeon will cut those trees back without written consent from the landowner. And they've refused to give us permission to cut those trees back. So our objection is not to, we want the trees to stay, but we want the trees maintained. Now that part of the garden, we do not let our grandkids use that part of the garden when there's wind about, because there is always lumps of trees falling down and also into the road, because they actually encroach into our land by 7 metres or more, and that was 2020, so it's probably more than 7 metres, and all we want to do is cut the trees back, but where the trees have got so high and so wide, my last conversation with the tree surgeon was you cannot just cut them back because you'll make the trees unstable. So you have to go from the top and down. Now, we had a quote for that, which was £6,500. Now, we were asked by the landowner to get a survey done, which we got done at our own cost, handed it to them, and they said they'd get it done, and they haven't done anything about it, and that was 2020. So I'm not spending £6,500 on maintaining that tree and keeping that tree in good health. That should be to the landowner's consent. So if you're going to put a TP order on an area that's used by children walking through, it's all right at the moment in the summer when it's not so bad, but as you come through the winter, with trees falling off, branches falling off, that's a danger to the kids, danger to the public, danger to people using the lane in cars, vehicles and push bikes. So I feel that the council has more clout than I do, because she's threatened to sue me if I cut those trees back. So I feel if you're going to put a TPO order on it, which I believe you should at least enforce the landowners to maintain those trees so they are safe for all public people going through the woods and up the road. And that's all I've got to say. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks. All right, questions for John and Francesca? Martin.
Does the council have any role in what the neighbour has just requested in trying to get the maintenance done to the trees?
Well, the responsibility remains with the landowner. That's the first point. But what we can do is apply pressure and facilitate discussions. But the starting point is it would be a civil matter between the two landowners about whether the work's needed. Where we can intervene is if we think there's clear and imminent danger, and then we could, in effect, instruct our tree contractor to carry out works and then charge it back to the landowner. But that's a last resort. It would be the landowner's responsibility and their liability should anything happen.
So, two follow-up questions. One, putting the TPO on does not affect that issue, the maintenance issue, correct? And no. Secondly, it sounds as if the neighbour has done what they can to try, through civil process, short of going to court, to get the tree work done. So has it come to the point where we should intervene in some way?
No, well, it remains the landowner's responsibility, but we don't have any evidence to show that it is at that such a danger or an unsafe level where we need to take that last resort and step in. So at the moment, we don't have that evidence or know that the trees are dangerous. But yeah, I appreciate the neighbour has tried hard to make contact with the owner and has provided them with a tree survey that says maintenance work is needed, and I totally understand the concerns they're raising, but at the moment I don't think there's sufficient evidence to say that we need to take that last resort step and step in at this moment. But what the TPO doesn't do is it doesn't put that responsibility on us to do works. It's still the landowner's responsibility. Whether or not we put the TPO on or not, they're still liable or responsible for any works or damage that might occur.
Yeah, basically all the TPO does is it says nobody can do anything to the trees that's harmful. Doesn't prevent maintenance or anything that keeps the trees safe or healthy. Any more questions? Gary and then John.
Sorry for this, but I've got another two-part question. The first part is I was once told by a barrister that if a tree overhangs your land, you can chop it back, but you have to give the wood back. That may or may not be true, but my question is that true?
Partly true, yes. Yeah, if the putting the issue of a TPO to one side, obviously if there
Yeah.
is a TPO you still need consent. But if there is a tree overhanging your land, you are entitled to take action to remove that 'cause it's a nuisance. But you should always seek the landowner's consent first. And yeah, there's a debate about the wood.
And that brings me on to my second point. If a future resident who was less careful than Mr. Norman has been, decided to cut the part of the tree that overhung their land, would that make that tree less or more stable?
Well, first of all, they'd be if we confirm the TPO, they'd be committing.
No, I'm
committing an
assuming
offence.
without a TPO,
Without
if they
T-
did that.
Yeah, potentially it could, but we'd need to take that expert advice because,
Yeah.
in effect, you might be upsetting the balance of the tree or making the group more susceptible to wind, shear, and things like that. So yes, it could potentially have an impact. That's why the value of a TPO allows us to get the expert opinion and to check things like that at the same time.
And in the absence of a TPO, they could do that, and that's why one of the reasons why we're seeking to put one on. Okay.
John?
Thank you. When I went to look at the site the other day, I couldn't go on the site's visit, but I've been there since. I could see the lime trees, but I couldn't see the other tree. That's further back, is it? And so are we looking at 3, 4 trees, 4 TPOs, 3 TPOs?
Can
Or
you put the
just one-
pictures up
one
on the
to
screen
cover
again,
the
John?
lot, is it?
Yeah, the U's, you see those walking along the footpath into the site. But John could get the
Yeah,
pictures.
we've got 3 groups. So the ones near the road at the bottom, they're the lime trees. And then the U's are the ones in the middle. So they're the ones where the footpath you walk underneath. And then we've got the single tree at the top. So if I go back to the pictures. So the lime trees are these ones on the left. The yew trees are darker green in the middle. And then the Lawson is on the end. I've got, so yeah, where is it? So that's they're the yew trees where you walk through, so that's the sort of middle of the site. And then this is looking from the bottom, so the lime trees on the right here, the darker yew in the middle, and then the Lawson on the left there.
Okay, any more questions? In which case, does anybody wish to propose officer advice? Helen, and seconded by Gary. Gary, I should ask you, do you want to kick off with debate first?
I think it's relatively straightforward. There's not actually anyone here objecting to a TPO per se. They're objecting to the lack of maintenance, and the placing of a TPO doesn't seem to have any effect on that. So I think we're probably all agreeing, but there is real value in these trees. I won't go into the detail that Becky has, but I went there, like John, on my own, and I thought I would have to go right round, and there are roadworks on that road, to see from both ends. But that cut through is a really nice cut through, and is a real saving of time for people who go to that school from Gunhouse Lane. And so there's real value to the community. It's obvious the community value it. It's obvious even the neighbours value it. They just like it tidied up a bit. So I think it's not a difficult decision to place the TPO, because everybody wants it. People want something else done with it, but that's not the question in front of us. So I'm pretty sure that we all ought to vote to place the TPO on those trees, or on all 3 bunches of those trees.
Anybody else want to debate? Helen, did you? Okay. Victoria, and then Lucas.
Thank you. I agree with everything Councillor Luff has just said, and I'd also like to applaud the residents and the local parish for protecting the byway and for bringing the TPO to attention. I think that's really good. I think if we don't have the voice of our residents, those things get missed. thank public people for speaking as well. I think it's really important that we get to hear all sides, and as you said, there's no one else objecting this. They have a real value, they're beautiful, they've got a snicket. Whilst ferries and things are not planning considerations, it's still nice to hear. But I do think residents and the local parish should be applauded for what they've brought to the table today. Thank you.
Lucas.
Yeah, I think in a community, all parties need to work together, and indeed, if one of the parties concerned does not work with the other parties, then there's always difficulty. And it's sad that this difficulty is arising, that we can't all work together to maintain these trees. And I would like a special mention made to the very good presentation by Becky Eldham, Councillor Eldham, who I wish I could bottle it.
Helen, did you want to sum up if everybody else is done?
I don't think there's anything else left to say. I think we're all in agreement that this TPO needs to be made, so let's go and do that.
Okay, I would just say that, yeah, Becky mentioned biodiversity, and biodiversity is one of the issues that the main issue is amenity value and contribution to the street scene and the landscape. But biodiversity, when you've got a group of trees like this, well, even with an individual tree, but especially when you've got a group of trees and the next one, even more so, where it's virtually a woodland, biodiversity comes into it and is another very good reason for imposing a TPO. Right, okay. So if we're finished with debate, then I think we can go to a vote. So it's 1, if you're in favour of putting the TPO into place, 2 if you disagree, 3 if you want to abstain. And that looks like that's unanimous. Okay, right. If you want to go, that's fine. We're going to move on to the next item now. Thanks for coming, and thanks for your contributions. Okay, and the third TPO in question is land at Middle Hill, Eastcombe. And again, John's going to introduce this one. And once again, the officer advises to confirm the TPO. So just give people a moment to leave. Okay. John?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is the one at Middle Hill. This TPO is for a woodland area, so it's slightly different than the others, but same principles apply. You can see the site there. This is a young deciduous woodland. It's located on a prominent position on the crossroads, four-way crossroads, Middle Hill. So it's the woodland area here, and you can see the main roads through the village. That's the dentist and the garage, if that helps you identify it. The wood is made up of a mixture of predominantly sycamore and ash, but there's also another, there's a mix of hawthorn and other species like oak, and the understory has other things like holly and beech. So you can see it's this area here. It's a self-set woodland. It's obviously not ancient, but we consider it still has significant amenity value. It's prominently located on the crossroad and 2 busy roads in the village. You can see it there in the photos. It is prominent, and we think it has a significant benefit, landscape terms, visual impact, and the ecological value adds to the amenity value. The Parish Council have raised this site with us. They raised concern when the land came up for sale. So that was our reason and the expediency to look to protect the trees. We have received objection to it. This raised procedural matters which are covered in the report, but we're happy now that the current TPO has addressed those issues. They've also questioned the impact and the significance and whether it is expedient to place the TPO. We're happy that the woodland does have that amenity value. There is that public interest shown by the parish council and local residents supporting it. Therefore, we're recommending that the TPO is confirmed without modification.
Okay, thanks, John. And we've got Councillor Louise Wilkes from Bisley Wood Lippiott Parish Council. You'll have 4 minutes. The clock will be up on the screen, and I'll let you know if you're going over.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to speak. The parish of Bisley with Lippiott support the TPO of the woodlands at Middle Hill for the following reasons. Its location forms an important visual amenity with the AONB to the local communities and a significant contribution to local landscape character. The woodland is located at the crossroads of two long, straight, well-used roads, Old Neighbourhood and Middle Hill, and therefore is highly visible to the public from all 4 directions, affording long and immediate views. It is an important gateway landscape feature that announces the entrance to the Eastcombe Ward and the boundary between Chalford and Bisley with Lippiott parishes, contributing to streetscape, placemaking and wayfinding. The woodland screens the urban edge from the rural landscape. This function reduces visual coalescence between built-up areas containing the border of residential development from the adjacent fields. The woodland marks the connections of hedgerows and verges, which form part of a wider green infrastructure network along the parish boundaries and well-used roads through the parishes. This local amenity provides a natural refuge and corridor for wildlife. The wood and its connecting hedgerows and verges provide a different wilding habitat to the larger woods of Frithwood and Toadsmoor, encouraging biodiversity of flora and fauna, understory vegetation and the like. This local wildwood is surrounded by maintained and managed land, residential and farmed, so its biodiverse ecological contribution should not be underestimated. A relatively young woodland, it therefore has potential to continue as an asset into the future. The tree species on site contribute to the biodiversity of the area, and the ash trees should be protected through this order and not felled in line with DEFRA's current guidance, as they do not impact the safety of the highway. Although no specific formal wildlife surveys have been carried out, it would not be unreasonable to conclude the woods in question provide a habitat to a range of flora and fauna that are common in the locale, such as a variety of bird species, insects, small and large mammals, reptiles, etc. This prominent local small woodland is experienced and visually enjoyed by walkers, cyclists and drivers going about their daily business, travelling between Bisley, Buses, Chalford and Eastcombe. Without a TPO, there is no way to ensure this locally important amenity is protected and any changes in the future approved. Thank you.
Thanks. And speaking in favour of the TPO, I have Ursula Sadler. Again, you'll have 4 minutes. It'll be up on the screen, so if you can keep an eye on the time, because I will have to let you know if you're looking like you're going to go over. Okay?
Yes, good evening. Thank you for letting us speak. My husband and I live next door to the woodland in question, and although it is owned by a couple that live a long, long way away, we tend to go into the wood with their permission and do a little bit of sorting out of leaves and all that sort of stuff that needs to be done. But we don't own the woodland. But we do wholeheartedly agree that the trees in the woodland are worthy of this order. They have a public amenity value and their value as a natural habitat. Daily, we see a variety of wildlife in that woodland. It's one of the few places left where the deer may safely shelter to avoid the danger of the traffic on both the Bisley and Middle Hill roads. We often see foxes and squirrels, and there is a diverse variety of birds who nest and feed within the wood. For the last 10 years, there's been a rookery of between 5 and 7 nests within the woodland. We're strongly of the opinion that if the wood was not protected by such an order, it will be sold either for development or to the person who bid the highest at the recent auction, who, we were told by the agent, intended to use the timber to extend his logging business. He subsequently chose not to proceed once the temporary TPO was put onto the wood. So if it's taken off, there's a good chance that he will reinstate his offer. As far as the development potential is concerned, although it might be argued that it's unlikely that planning permission would be granted due to the wood being within an AONB area, why would anybody buy the wood if they didn't see it as an opportunity to develop in the mid to long term? We're strongly of the opinion that were the woodland to be affected by future development or changes to its land use, consideration of the amenity value of the trees and the surrounding area should be paramount to any decision. That's me.
Thank you. Right. Questions for officers? Jenny?
I noted in the report previously the wood had been coppiced. If we put a TPO, would that, because if you coppice wood, you renew the wood, don't you? They live longer. So if somebody wanted to buy the wood for a logging business and they coppice the wood in a orderly fashion every so many years, a TPO, would that prevent that?
A TPO would mean they'd have to ask us to do it, so we'd be able to check that what they're proposing is an appropriate management technique. So it doesn't mean that they can't touch it, but they could come, as you said, and coppice areas of it or phase that work, or it might be they need to do some work on the ash trees. That might be, but as you said, you take out some, it allows others to regrow and rejuvenate. So that's where we would be assessing whether or not that's an appropriate level of management to protect the woodland. So I suppose the short answer is yes, it would allow appropriate management to take place.
Yeah, and there are issues around appropriate management. There are regulations on how much wood you can actually extract from woodland and stuff like that. So, yeah, it would come to us and we would look into all of that and decide whether it was, as John said, appropriate management. Any other questions? John and then Gary.
Thank you. I got 2 or 3 questions, actually. Won't be long. So this is one order that covers the whole of the site, is that correct?
Yeah, it's one order that it covers a woodland rather than an individual tree, so it covers the whole site.
Yeah, okay, that's clear. Are they planted trees or are they self-seeded saplings or shooting up from previously felled trees, that sort of thing? I haven't actually been.
I think our tree consultant's saying it was self-set, so we don't necessarily think it was orderly planted, but it's been allowed to grow up.
Okay, thank you. I was just looking at the objections on page 89 of the report. Paragraph 1, 2 and 3 of those objections actually. Can you comment on those, please, John? The map is invalid. Council has not made the TPO publicly available, and the notice accompanying the TPO is in conflict with the requirements and so on and so on.
Yeah, they've raised lots of more sort of procedural.
Sorry, John, can you just switch your mic off?
Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, they've raised procedural matters, and there were errors when we first issued the previous TPO, and we're happy now that this current TPO has addressed it. So we're happy that the map's clear and meets the regulations. We're happy that we've served the notice in the correct way. It's been served on the owners, they've had a copy, and we've done the appropriate advertisement, so it's been posted on the site, and in addition, it's on our website, but that's not necessarily a requirement of the regulations, but it is there now as well. So we're happy with the support of our experienced tree consultant that we've met all the statutory requirements and all the regulations have been met. So we're happy that it would stand the test as a lawful order.
Gary?
Councillor Jones has just asked my questions, so thank you.
Any more questions? If not, then anybody like to propose the officer advice? Lucas, seconded by Jenny. Jenny, do you want to kick off debate?
I only wanted to say that when I went there, I thought it had not only amenity value, but it had biodiversity value, and as long as it was properly managed, I think it adds to the area.
Anybody else? Yeah, Martin.
Yeah, well, the parish councillor and the neighbours have made the case very well, I think. The amenity value from its visual landscape appearance in particular, and the biodiversity. And I just, to add to what Louis, the parish councillor, said about the nature of it as a sort of semi-scrub woodland, seems to me, in contrast with some other woodlands in the area, such as Frithwood, it's a different sort of habitat. It's Frithwood is tall beech trees with little undergrowth, and this one is low trees, a very mixed area with under scrub, which I think provides an important habitat and connects. I think Louis may have made this point that there are hedges from there, so it's part of wildlife corridors through that area and up onto the higher land towards Bisley. So I support it. Thank you.
Yes, as someone who was brought up as a school child in East County, Frithwood used to be much more like that. It had a lot of understory, and it was much better for biodiversity. Unfortunately, it was thoroughly cleared out, and it is useful that there's patches that do have decent understory. Yes, Lucas?
I think it's every time very obvious that dialogue helps, and I think by putting a TPO on, any owner is required to be in dialogue with the council on the best way forward for such a woodland in whatever state it is. So I really welcome the putting of a TPO on, so that the opportunity and the necessity for dialogue is established.
John?
Just to be clear, I said I hadn't been there recently, but I do know the area. I've done business there when I was working, so I know what the place is like. I've seen it, or maybe 15 years or so ago, but I do know what it's like, so just to be clear.
Okay. Gary?
I'm broadly in favour of this TPO. The one thing I would say is that we obviously do have a desperate need for housing in our district, but I'm not sure the whys and wherefores of whether this particular place is developable. But on the flip side, not only do we have this amenity value that that everyone else has talked about, it provides a very good screen from the Mirco garage, which actually would be a bit of a blot on the landscape if it wasn't protected by this woodland.
Thank you, Councillor Love.
Okay. Any more debate, or can we go to a vote? I'll go to a vote then. Okay, so all those in favour of the TPO, it's when the lights come up. 1 for yes, 2 for no, 3 to abstain. And that also looks unanimous. Yep. And that's it. Sorry, do we have some, where are we? Statistics for you. Oh, that's the old, okay. It's the KP, yes, Jerry's going to introduce them. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, for information, but happy to answer any questions. But attached to the agenda were our most recent quarterly stats for development control and enforcement. So most pertinent, possibly if you have them in front of you, is on page, the pages aren't numbered, apologies, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which just highlights our major, minor and other percentages, which are quarterly figures that we need to submit to the government. So majors were 90% in the last quarter ending in June, end of June. Minors were 93% decisions made within the appropriate time, and others, which is mainly householders, was 94%. So certainly that, you know, pretty good set of figures there. Enforcement inquiries, again, just some basic data really on numbers. We're still getting a relatively high percentage of enforcement inquiries coming in. We're still trying to recruit to the senior enforcement officer role. That second advert, we got no applications for the first advert. So we put it out again, and that ends this weekend. So fingers crossed we might get some applicants this time. But happy to answer any questions.
But we do have extra consultancy cover that we've brought in. So in the absence of a senior enforcement officer, we are doing what we can. Yes, Gary?
There seems to be a reduction in the number of applications. I presume that's something to do with interest rates and the like. Is that continuing? And does that allow any opportunities for us to do maybe shifting people to enforcement, or is that too specialist a skill?
It's interesting actually, because I've been doing some work on performance at the moment, and you're absolutely right. The direction of travel at the moment is to have less applications. However, officers are still dealing with more applications than the national average. So the national average is that officers should deal with about 88 applications a year, and even under our current lower amount of applications this year, we're probably looking at about 122 applications per officer. So we're still up there. In an ideal world, though, Councillor Love, yes, I mean, that is what we would look to do if we could, but I don't think we've got that amount of capacity despite the reduction.
And enforcement is pretty specialised, and we do need somebody experienced. We have enough bodies, we have enough people on the ground to be doing the basic work, but we need that level of experience, especially to train up other people. Yeah, any other questions on the stats, or are we done? Looks like we're done. If anything does occur to anybody, I'm sure Jerry will be happy to respond privately. Okay, all right. Well, that was a fairly quick one. Thanks for coming.